Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 1st of September of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about China because the most important political statements and events are coming from this area. Today Xi Jinping made lots of very interesting statements at the SCO summit. He stated that and he called for establishment of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Development Bank as soon as possible. The combined economy of SCO countries has approached 30 trillion and the organization's economic influence is growing. China will provide SCO Interbank Consortium members with loans totaling 1.5 billion. China will implement 100 welfare projects for SCO countries. So we see that China is trying to build something new, something different from the US governance. Xi Jinping urges Russia, India, SCO countries to challenge West. Speaking at the SCO summit in Xinjiang, the Chinese president called on more than 20 leaders to build an orderly multipolar world and a new system of global governance that is fairer and independent of US dictates. She stressed that countries in the region need to expand cooperation, leverage their strength and share responsibility for peace and prosperity in Eurasia. The Financial Times notes that China is using the Tianjin summit to position itself as an alternative center of global governance. So very important step, and we see how happy the Russian president, how happy the Indian Prime Minister, and how happy the President of China. So these three persons are the base of new governance in the world, alternative to the Western countries, alternative to the United States of America. Of course, as for now, it's just the words. Of course, we need to see actions, but something tells me that actions we're going to see very, very soon. Now let's return back to Ukraine and let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, we got additional very interesting changes and very interesting updates. And first, let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians during the previous probably 72 or even more hours carry out several offensive operations with the purpose to establish control or to answer the settlement of Novodanilovka and Malotakmachka. Today, pro-Ukrainian resources published this video. And in this video, we can see how Russians were attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine to the south of the settlement of Novodanilovka. And here we can see how Ukrainians, FPV drone operators of Ronin team of 65th Mechanized Brigade, were attacking Russian vehicles, trying to stop them and to slow them down. When talking about this video, we can see at least 4 vehicles that were heading in the northern direction with the purpose to answer Novodanilovka. 4 vehicles, 3 infantry fighting vehicles with infantry on board, and 1 tank with anti-mines equipment. So the Ukrainians used probably tens of drones, but telling the truth, during this video we haven't seen even a single episode when Ukrainians managed to destroy at least 1 vehicle. It seems that the Russians managed to get the target and to answer the city of Novodanilovka. So when we return back to the map, the Russians were moving along this, approximately along this road. One of the geolocations, the only geolocation, was discovered exactly in this point. And the Russians were moving these 4 tanks, 4 vehicles more precisely. And the thing is that this point and this episode that was geolocated exactly in this point doesn't tell us that the Russians haven't managed to move even further in the northern direction. So this is the only geolocated point from that video. And as you can see, the distance between this geolocated point, let's say, and the first buildings of the settlement of Novodanilovka is 1 kilometer, which means that there are very high chances that as a result of this offensive operation, the Russians with 4 vehicles managed to answer the settlement of Novodanilovka from the south and to land infantry. We are waiting for additional updates, but very high chances that the battle for the Orikhiv agglomeration has begun. Another important thing that I would like to point your attention is that this attack towards the settlement of Novodanilivka is not the only attack that was carried out by the Russians probably since the middle of August. During the previous months, the Russians attacked the settlement of Orikhiv probably 3 or 4 times, also using vehicles and tanks. For example, this video was published somewhere around 18th of August of 2025, which means that this attack took place almost 2 weeks ago, and here we can see Russian tank that was moving towards the road NO8 in the area of Novodanilovka, and how Ukrainians were attacking Russians with FPV drones, how Russians were demining this attack road with the purpose then to use additional forces. So as you can see, during this video the Ukrainians attacked Russian tanks several times, but they didn't destroy it. This is another video that was published just 2 or 3 days ago. Here we can see another offensive attempt from the Russian side, this time in the direction of the settlement by the name of Mala-Takhmachka. The same story. The Russians, as you can see according to this video, used up to 5 vehicles, including a tank with demining equipment. The Ukrainians were attacking Russians with FPV drones. At least 1 vehicle was damaged and destroyed. So this is another attack that was recorded during the previous 10 days. So summarizing everything, we see that the Russians were trying to advance in the direction of the settlements of Mala-Takhmachka and Novodanilovka during the previous 14 days. As of now, once again, we don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to improve their position significantly, but something tells me that Ukrainian defense in this direction is collapsing. Furthermore, I would like to point your attention that these attacks started not like because they started because the Russians wanted at some early morning to begin something huge in the direction of Orikhiv. Since the beginning of August, the Russians were hunting and destroying Ukrainian positions, headquarters, especially of this 65th Mechanized Brigade, who is basically a core brigade of defense of the entire Orikhiv direction. And I would like to remind you that somewhere in the second half of August, the Russians attacked the settlement by the name of Toretsk. The Russians reported that they managed to discover Ukrainian FPV drone positions and headquarters, and then the Russians began bombing and attacking this territory with FPV drones, not with FPV drones, but with Geraint drones and with missiles. The Russians reported that Ukrainians suffered huge losses, and it seems that the main purpose and the main task of the Russians was to reduce the combat capabilities of this 65th Mechanized Brigade, as I told you, which is the core brigade in this direction. So probably the Russians managed to reduce the combat capabilities of this brigade, so that is why we see now the Russians are trying to intensify their offensive attempts, and most likely the Russians will continue, and most likely the Russians will try to establish control at least over these territories. We're talking about the villages of Mala-Takhmachka and Novodanilovka. If Russians are able to do this, then we can start talking about the battle for the city of Orikhiv itself. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation with the purpose to cut R85 road and south flank the settlement of Gulai-Polye from the north and from the northeast. During the previous 24 hours, pro-Ukrainian resources confirmed Russian control and Russian progress on the ground. According to pro-Ukrainian resources, this pocket was colored in Russian favor. So the Russians launched their offensive operation in this direction a long time ago, and probably during the previous 4 days we made lots of adjustments. This is the situation, for example, by the end of the 28th of August, and some sources are saying that this is the moment when the Russians began their offensive operation in the direction of this Kamyshyvaha pocket. And starting from the 29th of August, we've been adjusting the map every single day. This is the situation by the end of the 30th of August, when the Russians secured the village of Kamyshyvaha. Then we have additional changes on the ground, and by the beginning of the 1st of September of 2025, pro-Ukrainian resources colored this area completely in Russian favor. So the battle for the pocket has been finished, and now the Russians are advancing further in the western direction, and currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlements of Tirnova and the village of Berezova. So this is the main task of the Russians for the next stage. Furthermore, the group of forces East today published this video where we can see how the group of forces east were moving and were attacking and developing their offensive operation probably during the previous 2 or 3 months. Here we can see lots of flags that were raised by the Russian forces all over the inside the western Donetsk and the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, and here we can see how the Russians were advancing. So there is one important episode that wasn't published neither by the Minister of Defense or the group of forces east in the past, and we are talking about the village of Vorone. In this video we can see how Russians raised their flag on the territory of the settlement of Vorone in the most western part of the village. So this is another confirmation that during the previous days the Russians indeed took under control the village, and that the Minister of Defense report was correct regarding the situation in this area. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the western Donetsk direction. If you remember, during the previous video we were talking about the village of Dachne. We were talking about this video published by the 46th Air Mobile Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine, where we can see how Ukrainians raised flag in the most southeastern part of the settlement. Based on this video, during the previous episode we adjusted this territory in Russian favor. But just several hours after this video was published, I'm talking about this Ukrainian video, the Russians published this video where we can see also 2 Russian soldiers, but this time these 2 Russian soldiers were raising the Russian flag in the central part of the settlement. So what does it mean? So I'm just trying to tell you that the settlement of Dachne is the best example of the kill zone area. So this is a kill zone. So this is a kill zone that is not under any control. Neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians control this territory. Of course, when we're talking about our map, we have some lines, red polygon, yellow polygon, but telling the truth, this territory doesn't belong to anyone. The same situation, the same thing we can say about the most western Donetsk direction, about the villages of Zelený Gai and Andreevka Klivtsova. Of course, both the Russians and the Ukrainians have possibilities to answer these territories, for example, to create another media victory with another flag, but it's just a media victory over another kill zone. No chances both for the Russians, for Ukrainians, to survive in these kill zones. So that is why we believe that both the Russians and the Ukrainians, after they finish with these videos, were forced to fall back from these territories. Otherwise, there were very high chances that they could be destroyed by the opponent. Now let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk. During the previous 24 hours, we got a lot of updates, mainly from pro-Russian resources, about significant progress on the ground and about another breakthrough of Ukrainian defense by the Russians in the central and in the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk. In this video, we can see a total tower attack on Ukraine positions in the southern part. The several pro-Russian resources reported about huge progress on the ground. As for now, this progress hasn't been confirmed by anybody. We are waiting for additional details, but the previous experience tell us that most likely this is exactly the situation on the ground. If this information is correct, then most likely we can say that the defense of the armored forces of Ukraine in the central part of the city of Pokrovsk has collapsed completely. Furthermore, this is possibly a part of Russian offensive operation that was announced by different Ukrainian authorities during the previous few days. Furthermore, pro-Ukrainian resources are saying that the Russians also launched their offensive operation in the direction of Mirnograd from the east, but Ukrainians are saying that several vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles of the armored forces of the Russian Federation, were destroyed on their way towards the city. Anyway, we see probably not the full picture, but we are very close to the real situation on the ground. We see Russians began offensive from the southwest and from the northeast, and we believe that these days we're going to receive lots of changes on the ground. Now let's move further. As for the city of Konstantinovka, during the previous 24 hours, nothing interesting and special was recorded. The Syria's direction is the same story. The Russians continue hunting and bombing Ukrainian positions in the fields between villages, settlements in this direction. For example, in this video, we can see a few more strikes on Ukrainian trenches and fortifications on the way towards the city of Siversk itself, but as you can see, without changes on the ground. Here we can see another story, Ukraine positions along the river of Seversky Donetsk that were bombed by the Russians with artillery and aviation. A bit further to the north, we have changes on the ground recorded by neutral mappers in the direction of the settlement of Zarechne, but without major changes. Interesting video I would like to point to attention was published by the Russian special unit Rubicon, who specialized on using drones. We start receiving more and more updates and videos of how Russians were attacking Ukrainian vehicles, Ukrainian equipment in the area of Drobyshev and Liman, which means that the Russians are getting closer and closer to the both settlements. As for the city of Lysychansk, during the previous 24 hours, several pro-Russian resources reported that the Russians during the previous days managed to improve their positions, especially on the territory of the Sinelnikovo forest. So the Russians are saying that a huge part of this forest is already under complete Russian control, and that the Russians are about to answer the settlement of Sinelnikovo from the northwest. So we are waiting for this. If this information is correct, the Russians most likely will try to take the village under control and to cut T2104 road with the purpose to cut the city of Lysychansk from supplying support that goes from the southern part. So very interesting details, and maybe these days the Battle of Lysychansk will be intensified both by the Russians and by the Ukrainians. Another important thing, another important probably joke or something like this, today was discovered. If you remember, several days ago, the chief of general staff of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, Valery Gerasimov, reported about the current situation on the ground along the line of combat contact, and he provided the map of Russian progress on the ground. We made special video when we were analyzing the changes and differences between different mappers and the map of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. And today we got another probably interesting moment, and we are talking about this picture. In this picture we can see the southeastern part of Ukraine, the southern part of Ukraine, the southern part of Russia, and the Black Sea, and the most interesting thing is the border that goes in the southern and the southeastern part of Ukraine. According to this map that was revealed by the chief of the general staff of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, the territories of Odessa region, Nikolaev region, as well as Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Donetsk and Lugansk are the parts of the Russian Federation. So very interesting message that was sent by the chief of general staff of the armed forces of the Russian Federation to Ukraine. As for now, the Russians are very far from this situation. Once again, according to the map published by the chief of general staff, everything to the south of this red line, we are talking about this territory, where colored by the chief of the general staff of the armed forces of the Russian Federation as territories under control of the Russian forces and the Russian Federation. So this is exactly what you can see in this article and in this map. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.